Hello and welcome back to the Argyle CFO Summit, Lessons Learned in 2022. My name is Michael with Argyle. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our esteemed speaker. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Jose Cuevas, Head of Corporate and T&E FinTech Programs with Visa, and Tim Russo, Senior Director, FinTech Partnerships with TripActions. We're excited to have Jose and Tim with us for their thought leadership presentation titled New Approaches to Cost Savings and Spend Management. Jose and Tim, welcome, and over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael, and appreciate the introduction at the top of this session, and looking forward to having an engaging conversation with everybody. And before we get started, I'd let Jose kind of just give a little bit more background on who he is, and then I'll fill in a little bit more about who I am. So Jose, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Michael and team. And this is a great opportunity to be here with you, and it's gonna be fun. So a little bit about myself. I started my career as CFO. That was a little bit of my origin. So it's a great opportunity for me to bring all of the experiences that I had in the past. At some point in my career, I turned it into payments. And that's what I've been doing during the last, approximately 15 years in different organizations, from operations perspective, and also, from product and sales now at Visa. I am really thrived to work with team today, and looking forward to start this on.
Perfect, Jose. That's great, and thanks for filling in a little bit more about yourself. As far as myself, Tim Russo. At TripActions today. TripActions is a global leader in the travel management, expense management, and corporate card space. Previously, I've been working in payments and risk and fraud for over a decade. I spent about 6 years at Apple, helping them expand their local payment acceptance. I spent a year or so at JPMorgan Chase, and even long before that, have just been deep into the payments side of the house, which is deeply tied into finance, and we're looking forward to really having this conversation today. So without further ado, Jose, if it's all right with you, I'd love to just jump in and kind of dive into some of the questions and conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we know, and as we're all aware of, the economy is tightening today. We see it in the news, and we see it all around us as far as where companies and what companies are doing. And to that end, a lot of companies are then looking for ways to save money, be more cash and cost efficient. And so from your perspective, as we look at organizations that are scaling and growing, what have you seen, Jose, that's one of the biggest costs, as well as some of the surprise costs to that type of growth?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the key questions that we're facing, every organization is facing today, right? How do we identify the type of cost that is actually, giving us a little bit of a lot of pain? But let me give you first a little bit of context what I see, in order to set up the situation. So we have high inflation, right? A scenario. We have also a high growth momentum for many businesses, right? And also we see a lot of impact on the workforce, kind of transitioning from remote to hybrid to office and etc. So, those are three variables that are dramatically impacting the expense, bottom line of an organization, right? And then and a CFO should be, really looking at that, really carefully, right? And I think, those are kind of the main factors. When we talk about, opportunities for them to, create an impact and find a better performance, you pointed out very well. They're trying to, save money and the cost of the operation. They try to be more efficient in order to push for growth and help the organization. And I'm going to tell another one that I like very much, because we always consider time savings, right, in our organization, right? So those are three factors that I think it's important for a CFO to have in consideration.
Yeah, I think those are great call outs and completely makes sense. How have you found ways, from your past experience or talking to others in these positions, to reduce some of those costs and be the most efficient, not just more efficient, but again, due to where the economy is today, to be the most efficient with a budget? And
So there's an anecdote of when I was CFO. I had my corporate car. I was in a company that we were 100 employees, 150 employees, but only 5 of us had corporate cards, right? So you can imagine a little bit of the restrictions that the organization had, right? And I remember, making payments with the card, sending a fax, both sides, an authorization to charge $50,000 to pay a trip or something like that, right? So that's kind of, the experiences that, we should be looking at transitioning from into a more modern, optimized way with technology, right? I think that's kind of the key of an example that gives you the idea about where should we looking at that, right?
I mean, I think that makes sense and ties into what you just said about time savings too, as well, right? There is a cost to the value of time associated to your work, your employees' work, and tied into that budget. So I think it's a great call out, modernizing and automating a lot of our processes in place today.
Absolutely.
And I think that leads us. Yep. And I think from that concept, that leads us directly into this last this last question, which is, when we're looking at as an organization, we can't necessarily look at things in silo or even from a micro perspective, right? When you're in that CFO position, you have to be looking at that 30,000 foot view. And from that perspective, how should you be looking at things today at an organization, like your CapEx, your capital expenditures, compared to some of your operational expenditures? And I'm going to throw a question from the audience in here too, Jose, to kind of give you a little bit of a loop, but tied to CapEx, what would you recommend companies do to reduce, say, CapEx without causing undue harm to employees or customers?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, right? I think it's related to the economic momentum, right? Let's be honest. The CapEx is a strategic investment of the company in a specific assets, right? It could be technology, it could be supply chain, it could be other things, right? So the company is always going to have a very deep look on how to invest wisely for later to gain economies of scale, future savings, and etc. And that's where investing in technology is important. And on the other hand, a CFO is always looking for savings, right, on the operating expenses. You're spending too much. Is that expense justified, right? I think in a growth momentum like the one that we are, living as businesses, right, with all of the challenges, I think the right balance of any organization between savings and investing in CapEx or OpEx, right, it should be looked at with a very close detail, right? I don't have the answer, specifically, because, there might be some industry with more, interest in investing in technology than others. But long story short, the recommendation would be always look at what are the future cost savings, efficiencies that you're going to be driving through, your CapEx investment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. And made me think of a lesson that one of my managers at Apple told me when it concerned the OpEx side of the house, which is, don't make your finance team's job harder. So do your work on your end, and then your finance team will take care of you. So I think that's a really great call out.
That's right. That's right.
With that being said, we were talking very much present based, but I think when we think about how finance teams work and really around the budgeting process, our CFOs on the call, or CFOs at partners that you and I work with, they set their budgets last fall. And in the last 12 months, the world has changed. And I know that that's like a very obvious statement to say, but I mean, specifically from a finance and budgeting perspective, we've had supply chain issues. You called out inflation, and there's other additional, both domestic and international variables that have occurred over the last year that, really challenge what we've done and where we need to go and what we need to be looking at. So, we've talked about tools and we've talked about automation. How have you seen in the past year, with the way that things have shifted, the tech stack priority shifting for CFOs? Has it in any way? And if so, what are some thoughts or examples there?
Yeah, that's a super important question, and thank you for bringing that today, because a CFO has to deal with, or used to have to deal with, a multi-application environment in order to make an efficient way of doing their job, right? And in most of the cases, it was manual intensive, paper based, and if you had a tool, it was not connected with the rest, right? That for the best, that is a thing of the past. Now we can find software that actually includes accounting, includes budgeting, includes payment, includes reporting, includes control, all in one, right? Which makes the CFO life so easy, right? And TripActions is a clear player, that is investing heavily on having a suite of solutions that integrates payment and create that sense of integration that is reality, right? So I think it makes total sense that we are discussing that with you guys, because it's where we are heading, right?
Mm-hmm. It's single integration points, right? We can't always be doing, and not everybody has the tech resources, the engineering dev cycles to do multi-integration and multi-partner management. So having a single integration point that covers a vast majority of your needs is massively important. It ties again into that automation piece of the puzzle. And again, I think that automation question is going to keep popping up, and I'm going to pivot again. We're going to bring an audience question in here to keep you on your toes. I think it's important to what we just talked about, which is, when you think about automation tools, what are some that you think companies can employ to provide the same level of, let's say, customer service without necessarily hiring more workers, right? You don't want to spend and resource a bunch of tools, but then also hire 100 people, right? You have to kind of figure out that balance. So how do you look at something like that?
Yeah, it's spot on software and solutions that integrate multi activities in the organization. They need to operate seamlessly, within their strategy, within their goals, within the balance of a CapEx investment and OpEx savings, right? So it has to create that scalability and return. We're talking about ROI to the organization, that makes sense for the organization move on and integrate and implement those solutions, right? And
Yep.
If those tools are not automated, if they are clunky, if they don't speak the same language, it's going to fail the purpose, right? And it's going to benefit the organization, right?
Yep, absolutely. I think to that point, you have to know what tools to invest in, and one of the ways that you figure that out is making sure your data is clear, and okay, I know that I need an ISV tool that will handle this level of what workers are doing today, or I need a chat bot that's going to handle some of these low-hanging fruit questions that people on, let's say, a customer service team are wasting their time on. So it's get the data and let the data tell you what tools to invest in. You can't just do it, by yourself. But I think that then plays into this next question, which is, let's say, beyond the tools and automation, but thinking back more on that spend management, there's tools and technologies in that space as well. So what are you seeing as the latest technologies for teams to use in that space?
Yeah. That's a great transition to land specifically into payments, right? So a great portion of the CFO supervision is what the company and what the employees are spending their resources, right? So that's critical, right? So what we see is that, you know, the payments are evolving from paper trail, like checks, right? Which I
Mhm.
remember the audience that, you know, in US, there's a still amount of, you know, high amount of papers and checks being done every day, right? So
Right.
if the organization, if any organization is able to transition from that paper form or, you know, payment solution into a more digital and, you know, a technology advanced payment solution like cards, like virtual cards and etc., that would be a much more improvement overall of that, you know, control of those expenses, right? And if,
Mhm.
you know, on top of the payment, you have a tool, a software that integrates the data of the payments, the controls of those payments, the visibility, the reporting, the budget tied to an employee or a business unit, well, you have the perfect scenario, right? You have a winning solution that is going to stay, you know, with you in the organization for growth, to support that growth that we were talking about at the beginning of this chat, right?
Yep. It completely makes sense. And thinking back to even that last question that we had in the previous area, I think it makes, you know, ties into this last question here, which is around efficiencies, right? So it's not just about using latest technologies, it's about leveraging the right technology for your company. So, you know, how should finance teams be thinking about that type of technology leverage for efficiency purposes?
So, so I think, you know, there there are many options for a CFO to, you know, to have access to accounting software, to customer service software, to, you know, data reporting software, right? The key in the analysis would be, you know, what is the solution or the service provider that gives you the most efficiencies of integrating everything, right?
Right. Yep.
I think that would be kind of the main question. How with one platform I'm able to, you know, maximize my, you know, OPEX, you know, savings, right?
Yep.
And
Exactly.
that is very close related to payments, right?
Perfect. I think that takes us into our last section, which is thinking more future oriented about trends and the way that trends are influencing the way CFOs approach their spend management. So I'm going to kind of combine these first two questions for you and really challenge this, which is when we think about where technology is going, when we think about where innovation is going in in the payment space, how is that being used today to help spend management specifically within the concept of a distributed workforce? And then to that next level question, what are some of the benefits of utilizing a modern spend management solution?
Yeah. So, like, you know, the example that I used at the beginning of this chat about, you know, me being the CFO and making payments with my card through fax, right? That is kind of
Mm-hmm.
the starting point when you think about how these, you know, all of the pain points that surround that use case should be resolved, right? First, the
Yep.
ownership of that car, you know, with technology right now, we are able to, you know, assign cards to on and off to all of the employees, contractors, and suppliers that we work in a daily basis, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that is an amazing feature for, you know, for any organization. Have the trust that your solution, your payment solution, could be set on and off as you need is fantastic, right? The second, you know, point that is critical in innovation is the data, right? In the
Right.
past, you had to wait for the statement of that car to arrive the organization via mail every month, once a month. So
Right.
you don't realize about any transaction that has happened for a large amount of time, right? Right now, thanks to you know, specific capabilities in the card network industry, you have access real time to what every card is transaction and where, right? And there is
Right.
a third component, right? That, it's acceptance, right? There is, kind of a natural evolution that when a buyer and a supplier or a payer, and an acquirer are actually agreeing to use the same payment solution,
Yep.
everything, gets elevated, right? You buy faster, they collect the money faster, you have access to data, they have access to data. So there is a kind of a relationship that grows that benefits both ends, right? So those are three elements. There's many more, but those are three elements that are important to remark here.
Yeah, and I think that's a great call out too. And when you start, I think that last piece you talked about, right? It's the unification across the payment ecosystem. But then even on the other side, which is somebody like TripActions trying to unify the whole platform so that our cards and our expense management platform are integrated and talking to one another, and then tying in a travel piece. So from a travel management perspective or a CFO's perspective, everything's in kind of one unified experience. And it's technology driven. It kind of drives that modern spend management needs rather than getting a piece of paper, to your point or earlier, and faxing it, or getting a whole bunch of your receipts, putting it on a piece of paper, photocopying it, writing everything down, hoping you have all the receipts, hoping that the receipts are actually for what you're saying that they were paid for. Like there's a whole element of leakage and fraud risk that I knew from my background, that with a more modernized expense and spend management platform, you have way more control over. You have the policy controls up front, and you have the admin controls on the back to, really simplify the business, make things easier on that back end. So again, I think that unified piece is really important when we think about technology and payments moving forward.
Yeah. And let me add, knowing you and knowing the TripActions platform, you go an extra mile because you have the travel solution that seamlessly integrates with just what we just said, right? So it creates, even multiple endpoints to feed directly automatically into the CFO stream, right? Which is fantastic. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. We only have a few minutes left before we open this up for questions. So I'm going to let you, Jose, opine on the true future and really, how can finance leaders, thinking about your background, where you are today, where you've come from, of the future, best navigate a company through the unknown?
Yeah. That, if I can think about, what are the best step that I would take as a CFO today, it would be, the search of that platform that is going to be giving me full control of the payments that the organization is making. Okay. And that it not just includes, traditional, supplier payments or payroll or, any other expenses that I have in a recurring basis. That includes how, employees have access to their budget, and I have, full supervision, full control, full policy, checks, compliance, and etc. over all of them, right? So I can actually rely on, they going and investing, selling, doing what they do best without the constraint of having an archaic or an old, financial system that, it consumes their time, right? We want their organization to be thinking about growing and selling and, thriving rather than, worried about, okay, I haven't done this report. I haven't, reported this. Oh, I don't have the budget. I would look for a tool that allows me to, give that flexibility to the organization without me losing the control of the resources, of the cash of the organization.
I think that's a great call out, and again ties into this concept of unification. On the merchant acquiring space, we always talk about a unified payments experience, but really what you're talking about from a CFO perspective is a unified payment experience from there. That's tying in your accounts receivable, your accounts payable, your team budgeting, your payroll, that merchant acquiring cost of payments element. If you're in that space, I think having that type of universal ability to look into all of that, see what your CapEx and your OpEx opportunities are in that space, is massively important, rather than just trying to piece together individual silos and say we should do this here, but not knowing what the impact is downstream or upstream on somebody else.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Perfect. We have 5 minutes left, and I think we're going to jump into some questions. And we received a couple, so far. But to the audience, please keep them coming. We'll answer as many as we can in the next 5 minutes. I think one of the questions we got, Jose, was back to maybe on slide 2. We were talking about which tools most positively impacted the business, and I think that's we can generalize a little bit there. And from your perspective, what have you seen from a tools value?
Yeah. Yeah, we talk, that, all of the tools that a CFO has, interest, which is accounting, ERP, accounts payables, accounts receivable, are so critical for the organization. But especially, I would, be focused on payments, right? Because the payments softwares and platforms are evolving so quickly, and they're providing such an amount of advanced, features and integration and data. So that should be, an area of focus, right? What, software platforms with payments embedded, right, are going to help me to thrive in the organization. And if I go a level down, I would say, how can I make the life easier of employees, contractors, and etc., in order to manage those payments efficiently? Right. And if we see, what we are expecting, and seeing from organizations is how do we evolve that payment experience into mobile experiences? So there is more freedom. There is more included into a digital, end-to-end user experience and etc., that makes life easier for everyone, right?
Perfect. I think that's right on. Another question we got are, how are new technology investments affecting the ability to retain existing finance talent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It happens to you, team. It happens to me. If I use a clunky tool, I get frustrated, because at the end of the day, when I go home, I probably have access to the latest digital technology at home, right? And if I come back to work and say, hey guys, let's just invest on technology that is going to save my, my time half, so I can dedicate to other more productive activities. That's kind of the logical thinking of all of us, right? So I would say that, and there's some studies saying that, employees could get very frustrated if the organization is not adequately investing in technology, right?
Yep.
So, get rid of paper-based expense reports, please. That's a thing of the past, right? And go into non-expense environments like TripActions is creating, right? Which is a breakthrough, which is something that, is now a possibility for many organizations, right?
Yeah, I think when we think about modern technology, it's designed to give employees back time. And not that they're not going to do work, it's that time is now being able to be used for more valuable strategic opportunities within the corporation. Or, as an example, I don't have to do my expenses for 3 hours on a Sunday anymore. So now I have time to spend with my family, and that work-life balance plays itself out. So I think when we think about new technology, that's how we have to think about both from a value to a company and value to an employee. And I think we have one more question. We have about 2 minutes left, which is, and I think this is a really good one to end on, which is, how are organizations addressing the economic downturn without alarming employees?
Yeah, I think there's so many things to be alarmed in everyone's life, and the companies have some challenges ahead in order to communicate better about what is the future or the direction of an organization. Technology is one asset that the organizations could use, right? If we're talking about information that provide transparency, clarity, time savings, etc., that, it actually supports the message of the organization, right? So, investing in technology is definitely, a pillar in, supporting, a downturn in an economic or social moment, right? Because it kind of update with, the personal lives that we're living, right? Which is digitally based and based in technology advances.
100% agree. The only thing I can add is just be honest and transparent with your team. Don't try and hide it, because we can all read the news.
Mhm.
I think with that, we are out of time. If there's any information, if what you heard today interests you, we've provided some contact information for myself on LinkedIn. You can find Jose on LinkedIn as well. TripActions, again, is the company that I work for, a global leader in the travel, expense, and corporate card space. Please feel free to reach out to either one of us offline, and we'd be more than willing to have additional conversations about anything, because you have two payments and finance nerds that love talking and sharing their opinions on all of this. So with that,
Thank you, team.
thank you, everybody. Thanks, Jose. Thanks, Argyle, for putting together a really great session, and looking forward to the next one.
Thank you, team. Thank you, guys. I enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you, Jose and Tim, for such an insightful presentation. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today for this thought leadership. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event.